Welcome, Westside family, to the Westside podcast, and we're so excited to have you today. Our guest today was our speaker from this last Sunday. Her name is Lindsey Roy, and I'll give you a brief bio, but I want to encourage you to go to the link in this show notes or go to the website and watch the message she gave on Sunday. It was inspiring. It was powerful. It was life-changing. And not only do I want you to listen to it, but I want you to share it with some people. Well, after you listen to it, after you listen to the podcast today, make a list of people that you need to send this to. So I'm going to give you a brief bio on Lindsey, and we'll get started. So Lindsey is an executive at Hallmark. She has been for over 20 years. She is married. She has children. And most exciting for me is she is a fellow Westsider. And she contacted me about a year ago and told me about a TED Talk that she had given and how she really wanted to add a spiritual dimension to this. And so she sent it to me. I watched it, and I was blown away. And I said to her, I've got the first place I want you to share the spiritual foundational version with, and that is going to be Westside Family Church. And she'll tell you a little bit more about a vision she had about that. But she did not share that with me. I told her yesterday, I said, it is not easy to get a speaking spot at Westside Family Church. That's how blown away I was by her TED Talk. And so we planned it for this last Sunday, and it was quite amazing. So we're going to start off, Lindsey, with this idea that you wrote a book as well. And that's what we're going to dive into, the gift of perspective. But I want you to tell, first of all, a little bit about yourself, your work, your family. And then I'm going to ask you to give a Cliff Note version of your story, because I want people to go back and watch it on Sunday.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for all those wonderful comments. And it's just still, I'm basking in the glow of having the opportunity yesterday to share this story. And like I said yesterday, everyone has stories. I'm not unique, but I have felt called to share my story. So thank you for allowing me to do that.
You betcha.
But to your questions, so you already said, all the glowing things, all the titles, mom, wife, my career, but just add a little color commentary. So I'm a Kansas native. Yeah. I grew up in small town Kansas, and I lived in Chicago for a small period of time, but mainly I've been in Kansas City. So I've been here 25 years. Wow. Got married here, had both of my kids just, down the street here. And so very much this is home. And like you said, we are members here. My kids now, if you watch the service yesterday, if you attended that, in the pictures I showed, they were little, but now they're not so little. My son is 16 and my daughter is 14. So they are both going to be in high school this year. And like everybody, I think, the biggest blessing of my life is just everything I get to do with them. Yeah. So, that's just a little bit more about me than we were able to address.
And you went to...
Yes, I went to K-State.
Yeah, and the Cat, is that
the
a Cat?
Yeah, yes, where I grew up was just about an hour from there. So I always say K-State is... a great place. Most of my family has gone there. And so, that's where I went and met so many people I see here, met almost all of my doctors, even though K-State doesn't have a medical school. Again, the way making, how God puts people in your paths. I met them in untraditional ways, and now they're my doctors.
Yeah, isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
Hey, a story we didn't get a chance to talk about on Sunday was your baptism story. It's a little bit more unique than other people's story. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so there's kind of two main things that make it unique. One is maybe not as unique, but I grew up in the Catholic Church, and so I was baptized or dedicated, maybe as you might say, christened, whatever term people would use, as an infant. And that was something very important in my family and a great thing. But as my husband and I sought out, a different path for our faith, and we started going to Westside. And I haven't even told you this, Randy, but we were sort of doing this, okay, let's shop for where we felt at home. And we came here several years ago, and we never went anywhere else.
Is that right?
Yes, we've been coming here ever since. But it was on my heart for several years to choose to be baptized as an adult. Yeah. But again, it was not something that I was used to, and it was not something that was, always done in my family. So it took me a bit to figure out how and when to do that. But after I ended up having, this incredible journey that pushed me to a much stronger faith after my lung transplant, I told my husband, I said, I can't not do this. Like,
Right,
and he
right.
was like, yeah, absolutely. And so the second part that makes it unique is with a prosthetic leg, it's hard to get wet. I have a unique condition related to my lungs that also creates some issues with getting in the baptismal tank. So I called you all up, and Pastor Brad said, no problem. So my husband, my 2 kids, and I came, and we did just a special ceremony. But then I shared that on Facebook. I knew it was important to share it publicly.
Yes, it is.
And declare my faith.
Yes.
And so I took that, courageous step for me to share that. And it was my way of sharing something that, even though it happened in private, I wanted to declare to everybody that I'd done it.
That is so important. And it was a little bit of an untraditional, like didn't put you in the tank and
Right.
put you all under. We did more of an anointing kind of like
Exactly.
a thing, which to me, a couple things for the people that are listening or watching is so important that Jesus doesn't really ask a lot from us, really, but he wants you to make it clear to everybody that you've made this decision. And so this idea of baptism is the word baptizo. It means to drown. And it's the idea of dying to the old Adam and rising again to the new Adam. But at the end of the day, it's the heart that Jesus is always getting at, is the heart. It is the heart, is the heart. And that's what's so beautiful about it, and why Pastor Brad said, yeah, traditionally, we do this, but Jesus is looking at the heart and going like, yeah, this totally counts. The other thing that you said that I think is so important is that Jesus said to us, he says, if you are ashamed of me on earth, I will be ashamed of you before my Father.
Right.
But if you are not ashamed of me, if you proclaim my name on earth, I will whisper your name to my Father. And so when people get baptized, a lot of times people come to me and say, I want a private ceremony. I don't want to tell anybody. It's a personal thing. I'm like, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. You got to let people know so that if you were put on trial, would there be enough evidence to convict you of being a follower of Jesus? Well, baptism in the first century was exactly how that was determined. When people got baptized in the Jordan River, it wasn't just the fellow believers. It was the Jewish people that they did business with, and they shook their head and said, if you do that, we're done. And people paid a high price for that. So congratulations on that, and thanks for being a part of the Westside family. Okay, give us because I want people to go back and listen to the whole story. I also want them to pick up the book, The Gift of Perspective, to read the book. It's a really easy read. I found myself, I've read it twice now, and I just found it not that difficult to get through because it's a story. So it's good. Give us kind of a Cliff Note version, because people go back and listen to the whole sermon. But what's up with you?
Yeah. So the Cliff Note story is I've had 2 major kind of life-altering health incidents. 2013, I ended up in an accident where I had an amputation and other injuries. And so, that required learning to walk again and all of those things that I think a lot of us take for granted. And then fast forward 8 years after that, in 2021, I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease that had attacked my lungs, made my lungs and heart go under a lot of enormous challenge. And so that resulted in the need for a double lung transplant, which I was thankfully able to receive that miracle in 2022.
Yeah. So, folks, I said on Sunday, you had already left to go to the table to greet with people. And I said, everybody has trauma in their life and loss and difficult circumstances. It's probably not likely that yours was as traumatic. Now, we talked about there are that are greater, but most of us don't have that kind of trauma in our life. And to have, I call it 2 black beans, one, it was the boating accident, which is, even for people listening or on Sunday, could actually trigger a little bit of trauma. Yeah. So I really appreciate you not going to too much detail about that. You called it dancing with a propeller, which I thought was, again, a wonderful, humorous way, which you talk about in the book, of kind of dealing with your trauma. And, if that wasn't enough, there must have been a sense of, my gosh, God, what the heck, to have a double lung transplant. And you are still very young. So that's pretty challenging. So in your book, I think it's 7 chapters.
Yes,
and
that was on purpose, by the way.
Oh, yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, just on that real quick. When I had my lung transplant, as I shared in the service, it was on July 7th. And I was born in 77. And then a good friend of mine texted me and said, I had actually never read the Bible front to cover, but I gave myself a challenge. I did I did that last year, but she was a better student than I was. And again, I challenged myself. But she texted me and she said, 7 means completion and perfection in the Bible. Right. And so my book had 6 chapters in the making, but I felt really called to say, another wink back to God for everything He's done for me. So anyway, yes, there are 7 chapters.
There are 7 chapters, and these are sort of your experience, your journey, maybe prescription for a person who is struggling and is in a hole to how do you kind of regain a perspective, and you call it a gift of perspective. So what I want to do is I want to cover chapter 1 and then chapter 7, see how much time we have, because chapter 1, you refer to it as your number one recommendation. And then when we get to chapter 7, I caught you. You said, I saved the best for last. Yeah. And so they're like a tie.
They're actually not a tie. You're the first person who's called this out before. I love it. You're better than my editor. But I think really, I always think about chapter 7, which is the chapter about faith, to be on a different plane.
Yes.
The first 6 are, I'm like, perspective is most important. And perspective also, as I tied into the message yesterday or on Sunday, was all about God's perspective and our perspective. But faith definitely wins. Chapter 7 definitely wins.
Before I dive into it, because it was one of the things for everyone listening, watching, Lindsey's primary audience up to this point has been the corporate space. So she's been invited. I mentioned this yesterday. I mean, she's been featured in Forbes magazine, Fast Company, Working Mother magazine, and a couple of others. So her primary audience has been an audience that wouldn't take so well to her, quoting, the book of Romans and John quite a bit. But underneath all of this, which I almost always find, is there's a strong faith. And so now Lindsey's developing this personal spiritual part, and she saved chapter 7, 7th recommendation, to really start talking about faith. So it was there. So let's dive into the first one. So I got that right on the faith deal. You're now in a new space where you want to bring that out, right?
Yep. Yes.
Yep. Okay, the first one you say, choose your view, okay? And you have this quote in the book, we can complain because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because thorn bushes have roses. Explain.
So in my mind, we talk about this word perspective all the time, but what I've observed is we talk about it, and I briefly mentioned this in my TED Talk, but we talk about it in a third-party passive way. We will be worrying about things that maybe we know in our heart are not that important, but when we hear something, like imagine, how we all felt after hearing all the floods in Texas last week, or when your neighbor tells you they have a cancer diagnosis, or those things hit you. And what do we say? We say, oh, that puts things in perspective. And all of a sudden, maybe we're a little kinder. Maybe we give people a little more grace. Maybe we're not worried about silly things. But that is a very passive and almost relying on kind of a third-party challenge, right?
Yeah.
But it's a very powerful feeling. And so I started to discover as I was going through, again, learning to walk and being in hospitals, and that accident happened when I was 36 years old, when you think you're highly invincible, and then having this lung transplant thing happen. And throughout those journeys, I found you can A, be bitter, B, give up, and all of these things, by the way, everything I was given, these gifts were given from God. I know that, but as I discovered them, the strength and, positive outlook, and that doesn't mean you have to be positive all the time. I mean, I was angry, I was depressed, all of those things. But through that forging in the fire, I realized that a lot of circumstances are simply that, and you have to change your perspective and decide how you want to see things. And that takes some hard work. It takes hard work to say, okay, maybe these things are terrible, but there are some things that are going right. Let me give them a little bit of space. Or this situation is not ideal, but it actually could be worse. Let me give my mind a little bit of space over what I can control and to think about the good things. Or I always tell my kids, I'm like, imagine our house. You can see it from Google Earth. You can see it from a drone. You can see it from your bedroom. You can see it from the front door. It's still our house.
Yeah.
But you're choosing which way you want to view that. And I have found, and even some of the tactics we might get into today sound so silly when you really, really need it, when you're in a desperate place. they're very powerful.
Yeah, and a couple of things. Number one, I appreciate you. I was talking to Dan Siegel of the Mind Institute, and he was saying, "Hey, Randy," because I wrote a book called The Joy Challenge, and he's like, "Hey, don't present." I think he used the word sort of like forced positivity or something like that. It's
Toxic
like
positivity.
Toxic positivity.
That's like the term.
That's a term, toxic positivity. And I appreciated you saying that. Hey, there's still times when you're angry. There's still times you're processing it, and we're not trying to say to people, "Oh, you can't. You just got to put this plastic sort of like pretend like everything's together. Post on Instagram. Yeah, I just lost my leg, but ha ha ha. It's not that problem. Not big of a problem." So we're not talking about that, but we are talking about almost, I would say, spiritual disciplines. Spiritual disciplines, and they're not like a pill you take and it's all over. It's a discipline that you go over and over and over again. And you quoted Philippians 4:7. Was it 4:7 you quoted on Sunday, or Philippians 4? Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, and
thank God for all He has done.
Thank for all God He's done, and that's a spiritual discipline that you just got to keep doing. And some days it doesn't work, but what's your alternative, right? Okay, so you gave 3 questions. What's going right? What's the upside of this seemingly terrible situation? And what have I accomplished today? Talk a little bit more about that. I mean, you kind of already have, but go a little deeper.
Yeah, and I'll give a couple of examples and stories I haven't mentioned yet. So again, I do think sometimes, the greatest things come out of challenge, and we all know that. But again, living it, it's very true. And so getting to the point where I had to think about those questions came from a place of being deep in the pit. You don't just think of those when your day is perfect, right? And that's why I think it's important, like you just mentioned, to acknowledge that it's deep in the pit. And the Bible references this all the time, right? That we're built through challenge and hardship.
Yeah.
But it's very true in life. And so while I was in that pit, example, again, lying in my bed, a hospital bed that was donated to me by this guy who owned a mattress store, this amazing person who put this bed in our living room that had all the needs I needed to get in and out of my wheelchair. But all of a sudden, again, at 36 years old with a 2 and a 4-year-old, lying there just being so angry and, so sad, and ultimately getting so depressed. Again, it was like the grieving cycle. But in those moments, I would make myself think of things like, okay, what is going right today? And I had this giant poster board. One was hot pink and one was neon green that I had my husband get me. And I wrote on them to put by my bed things like, I put in my own ponytail today, because one of my arms was bandaged up for so long that I couldn't use it because it had been injured in the accident. Simple thing. I remember the first time I put on jeans. I had all of these wounds and issues. I would wear my husband's giant basketball shorts. And so like the silliest things, that's where it began. But then when I had my lung transplant, I would do things like, okay, what have I accomplished today? I had to go to a rehab situation every day for a few months, get on the treadmill, walk, do things. And I would say, today, I don't care how I feel, I'm going to go 0.1 miles further. The dumbest little things.
I know, yeah.
But again, it was this discipline. And it also has this benefit of making you feel like you can control something when most things, we really don't have any control over. And I know we don't ultimately have any control, but they're the things that we can alter, the things that we can look at differently, because our brains are wired for negativity.
They are. Yeah.
Yes.
I discovered that in my writings, and you mentioned it in your TED Talk, particularly. Yeah. And that's because God wired it, because in many eras of human history, there's so much danger that when a lion jumps out or a predator jumps out, the fast track system is going to take it right to the fear basis
100%.
of the amygdala, and it's going to like kick in gear your adrenaline glands and all that. So God's designed it for that. But we have to be aware that that's where it's going to go first. And you have to intentionally work against that, don't you?
For sure. You said it exactly right. We're wired for that fight or flight or fear, and our amygdala is like primary, and it is. It's adaptation. It's hardwiring. It serves a huge purpose. You don't want to have that lion jump out at you and say, all right, let me think about this.
Right.
And let me think about what could be worse. That's, to your point, why we're wired that way. But I found, and I've lived this, I've taken my own medicine. My book was halfway written, where I was writing about how you can do workouts for your brain like you do for your body. And some people have gratitude journals. Some people, use it when they're desperate, whatever your thing is. But when I went through my lung journey, when my book was halfway done, I thought, okay, God, I'm going to start taking my own medicine. And I had discovered that I had gotten better at kind of wiring my brain to be more open to possibilities, not just fast tracking it to fear and dismay and whatnot. And again, I'm not saying I was always perfect at that. I'm not saying it was always easy, but there are a lot of scientific studies, and I'm just like a person of one who have seen that it is a real thing. And you have to do what works for you. I give some tips in the book and lots of different tips because I'm a trial and error kind of person. But it's a fact, both physiologically and I think mentally and spiritually.
It really is. I've shared with the congregation, you've probably heard it, that I went through 2 seasons, but one long season of depression. For me, it ended up being episodic. I was betrayed, and I wasn't prepared. I went down into the basement of my brain and tried to figure it out by myself. Didn't as you talked about on Sunday, give it to God. I thought I can handle this, and I stayed down in the basement too long, and I got myself into deep trouble. And to get back out again, I had to practice these disciplines. So this is my journal where I have my notes on for you. I put all of it, but I am a journaler, and many times it is gratitude. Research now is showing that gratitude is probably the number one antidote to depression and anxiety. And Philippians, the passage you refer to, talks about it in 8 and 9. Whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are just. Think on these things, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. And so for me, in my journal, I'll have to explain it later to people. Whenever you come upon the word Japan, is when I am journaling, and it's got dates to when the other one was at, and I'll at some other time explain why it's Japan.
Piqued my curiosity.
I know. Well, I'm just going to have to pay an extra. There's a paywall here. No,
all right. Good to know. I'll have to listen to another podcast.
This is about your story, but I will tell you that I started journaling, and I started reading the Psalms in the morning at my doctor's request, and I started journaling after that, and it just didn't work. But I just kept at it because what was my alternative?
Exactly.
Right? Am I going to dig myself deeper in a hole? And I also learned about Pollyanna. You mentioned Pollyanna. I always thought that was like someone who was naive, but Pollyanna was all about a different perspective. So the story of Pollyanna was when she was locked in the attic, by the person that took her in after her parents died, and the mom was real mean to her. She was locked in the attic, and so she decided, and there was no pictures on the wall, and so she decided that the pictures out the window of God's creation were better than any picture on a wall. There's perspective. So she was talking to a couple of the people that worked at the house, the gardeners, and they were complaining about how bad the preacher's sermon was. And they said to her, "So Pollyanna, what are you going to say about that?" Because it was on a Sunday after the sermon. She says, "Well, we are 6 days away from having to hear him again." And I always thought that was really pretty funny. So Pollyanna was really someone who took a different perspective.
I didn't know that story. I used that term, but I didn't know that story.
That's Pollyanna. So Pollyanna is not naive. Pollyanna is all about the nature book. Hey, can we shift to you?
I want to say one thing, if you're okay with it. It was interesting you talking about gratitude and the power of it. I totally agree with that. And to give the listeners just another method, even though I'm a writer, I found I'm not a good journaler. And so one of the things I've discovered that I've done the last couple of years after my lung transplant, and if you ever see me in a parking lot, you'll probably think I'm crazy, but I have this thing when I get out of my car, anywhere I go, not all the time, every once in a while, you're running late, but most of the time, I'll stop and I just say a quick prayer of thank you for letting me be healthy enough to go to my son's basketball game. Thank you for letting me be able to carry my own chair into the baseball field because I couldn't even get myself from point A to point B. Little things. I mean, we complain about, today I took my daughter to the orthodontist, and it was the middle of the workday, things we don't love doing. But I remember the first time I learned to drive after my amputation, and I got to take her to the dentist. But I try to pause so many times during the day now, and I've found that just really gives me those kind of doses of gratitude. So just another little habit if some people are also not journalists.
And some days it won't work.
Yeah.
But if you build a discipline, brain science now tells us it works. But God's word has said it for years and years, through Paul's writings in Philippians particularly that you quoted. So trust it, get after it, do it. And what's your alternative? Okay, let's skip to the last principle.
Yes.
And that is engage your soul. Find a way to believe. Find a way to believe. And when you signed my book, which is this copy here, you signed Romans 12:12, and I'm going to start with that because you have 5 things that we're going to dive into. I'm going to ask you about this verse. It says, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, tribulation, steadfast in prayer.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
I was looking for, I feel like people have like their favorite verse, and I didn't have my favorite verse. And so it became one of these things. I'm like, okay, what's my favorite verse? And at Hallmark, I do a Christmas card, of course, every year, and I care very deeply about that card. And in the card I sent, getting my lung transplant in July, sending my card in December, I really wanted there to be a verse on the back of my card, even though, it's my corporate card. I'm like, this is something that was important to me. And so I became sort of obsessed with like, what's my favorite verse? And I discovered that, and I felt like that spoke exactly to how I feel. And there's a lot of, verses we all love, and there's some other ones that were kind of final candidates. But to me, the version I always think about, is joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that, it's the joyful in hope is don't overly borrow tomorrow's trouble. Don't obsess over things. I mean, I live, again, in constant state of medical challenges. It's not like a lung transplant is a light switch. And so I have to remind myself, I'm like, be okay with what is good and what is hopeful, and don't borrow tomorrow's trouble. Patient in affliction.
A quote from your sister, by the way?
Yes. Good. You really are good at
I'm
that.
deep in.
He has read the book twice. That is a quote from my sister. Good. Well done. You passed the test. And then the patient in affliction. I mean, I'm just getting over a cold now, and I have to do all these extra things even when I get a cold. But I remind myself, be patient. There's so much evidence of all the things God's done for me. Why would I give up now? And then faithful in prayer. I mean, I used to be the pray at bed at night, and that's better than nothing. But now I've found it's not just like a duty. It's something that gives me, I don't know, it's something I enjoy doing, or I feel good doing, or it gives me courage and direction and all of these kinds of things. And there's some days I'll say things like, God, I'm sorry I didn't pray enough, or I'm sorry I didn't say enough today for my organ donor. Or when I will get really fearful, I have this little secret thing I'll say, God, I'm sorry that I'm smaller than a mustard seed today. But
which is hard to do.
Exactly, because none of us are perfect. But I have found that, those three things help me.
This may seem strange, I never feel guilty for not praying. And it's a quote I heard from C.S. Lewis. When someone asked him about prayer, he says, I don't pray because I have to. Yeah. I pray because I'm desperate. And I'm like, that's my whole life. That's my life in a nutshell. I am desperate, and I do not want to be disconnected. I have access without a mediator to the creator of the universe who loves me, and I'm going to feel guilty because I didn't go to him? Are you kidding me? You have this access? How about feel stupid, but not guilty? And so I pray out of just complete desperation. I really do.
I so relate to that. And I think everybody does to a degree. What do you always hear? And my book features stories from lots of other people too, as you know. It's not just about me. I didn't want to make it just about me because I've met so many different people. And everyone I've met, because I've met some people in the hardest, crustiest parts of life, dealing with my same kinds of things on these journeys. And almost every single one of them has had a strengthened faith because you draw closer in times of desperation. And then you realize how that desperation is also applicable to just everyday life.
It is. It really is. And the scripture teaches that, and you mentioned this already, that it is in the trials that we experience that we find ourselves praying without ceasing, so when things are going great, I don't connect to my intimacy and my opportunity to be with God. And Paul said, the number one thing is to know God, is to know, and that the word know is not an intellectual, it's an experiential. It's a heart thing, right? And he says, and so if trial and tribulation is what draws you to God, then you can be thankful, for the affliction because it drew you into that space, right?
Right.
Okay. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things. I'm just going to ask you to give a kind of little, 5 principles on how to engage your soul. First one is seeing. Seeing someone who has gone before and found a successful outcome. I really like that one. I've used it a lot. Tell me a little bit more about seeing.
Yeah, so these 5 brands of belief that I discovered, and of course, again, the trusting that we'll get to in a minute, number 5 is the most important, but I found that seeing somebody else who has had a similar situation and has found a way through that darkness is so inspiring. And as you know, there's a woman named Amy Purdy, look her up, Google her, but double amputee around my same age, and she had a TED Talk a friend sent me after I lost my leg. She was on Dancing with the Stars. I got to see her dance on these 2 artificial legs, and I did not want to go to focus groups. I didn't, or support groups or anything like that. And my early trauma were all different. That wasn't useful for me. But seeing her from afar was so, so important to me. And I try to meet with people now who have gone through anything similar to I've gone through, because I want to pay back what I know is so important.
Add another story. I think I've told you about this, and the congregation might know a little bit about it, but I also have a son who is an amputee, but it's congenital. He was born without a left arm, right below his elbow. And a good friend of ours, while he was born, right after he was born, within the first 6 months, connected with a guy named Jim Abbott, who was a player, baseball player. Yes.
Yes, I know
you
exactly
know about
who Jim Abbott is. Of
Oh my
course.
gosh.
Yes.
I mean, he was like...
Every amputee knows about Jim Abbott.
Oh, man. I mean, he played for the Yankees. So, and then he was a minority owner in the Rangers when I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth. And he arranged when Jim Abbott was playing with the Yankees pitching for him to meet my son, David, who's now just turned 38.
How
He was
special.
6 maybe, and I have a picture of them standing together. And and my son had a signed autograph from Jim Abbott from his time at the University of Michigan, and that just gave my son a sense of, hey,
I can do this too.
amazing. And then when we went to our first, I was really struggling. I'm just a real basket case, Lindsey. I really am. I'm not, I'm a pastor, but I'm a basket case. And so I was really struggling with our son's, limb deficiency. And so I'm now in a limb deficient support group called PALS in Dallas. And so I didn't want to be there. I'm like, why? I'm the pastor. I tell people about support groups. I don't go to them. And it was a Christmas party, the first one we went to. And in the room, there was a boy playing the piano, and he was playing Chariots of Fire, the theme song, The Chariots of Fire. And he was a good-looking boy, probably about 12, 13, 14 years old. And I thought, oh, isn't that sweet? A brother of a limb-deficient sibling is playing the piano. And I walked over, and Austin Jones is his name, was playing the piano, missing the same hand as my son. And it was at that time I thought, stop it, Randy. Look at these people who've gone before, who've pushed their way through. That's really what you're talking about, isn't it?
For sure. It's just inspiring.
Yeah.
It's like we say, God puts people in your path. It's another way I think about it, right? How did you happen to run into that person that day? I happened to get this TED Talk from Amy Purdy. I've met Amy Purdy. I mean, these things tend to have a way of showing up.
So everybody that is listening, watching right now, identify, Lindsey has a limb deficiency. I remember a guy, his name is David something. He had cerebral palsy, and he would speak in his cerebral palsy. He says, I have cerebral palsy. What's your problem? So what's your problem? Okay, write it down and then look for 2, 3 people who've gone before you and hang out with them, read their stuff, and see if it doesn't help. Right?
Right.
Okay, let's go to number 2, absorbing, leveraging inspirational content, be it quotes, books, or music.
Yes. This is one that, again, I think can speak to your soul. And all 5 of these are kind of a menu. Some people might say, oh, number 3 is not for me or whatever. Like my husband always talks about, my love of quotes and things like that don't speak to him. So we're all different. But for me, having somebody send me some sort of quote just helps me think about things very differently. And I have a few friends that during my journeys were perfect at sending the right thing at the right time. Music is a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, music just speaks to our soul in a way that I don't think very many things can. And I have found, and of course I referenced this in my talk on Sunday, but I found in so many ways that music not only helps me feel better, helps me dream better, and it helps me later because it is this feedback loop that the Holy Spirit serves back up to me. And so I didn't used to listen to Christian music at all. I was not that person. But again, through desperation, I started to. And now whenever I work out, I have this little playlist called my praise workout. And I use those 30 minutes when I work out to always listen. And I find then I get off my bike or rower, the things that work well for my condition. And I feel like I've rejuvenated my soul and my body. And by planting those seeds in me, it just makes me feel better. It makes me have a consciousness. And so whether it's, again, someone's book or, a song or whatever it is, I found there's just something very powerful about taking in content that is positive and uplifting and helpful and speaks to you.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yeah.
Same thing. Truth in, truth out.
Yeah.
And you and I share a mutual love for country music. You refer to a book, we won't be able to get to it. So it's the song on your chapter on Be a Riser.
Yes.
Remember that country song?
Yes,
And
Dierks Bentley.
Dierks Bentley, that was a good song. And then this morning, I was listening to Casting Crowns, Scars in Heaven.
Yes.
And oh my gosh,
I can hardly handle that one though. That one's so sad.
Oh, it really is.
But it's beautiful.
But it's really beautiful. And I cry, but it ministers to my soul. So I'm not sure how anything besides country music and Christian music could help anybody, but maybe some people would find some help in those. I'm just joking. Yes, that's pretty good. Okay, now number 3 is asking and receiving, asking the people closest to you to help you believe in yourself. I like that. Tell me more.
So I feel like we all go through these periods of time, whether it's just life or it's a trauma circumstance or anything, where even if you don't admit it to others, you maybe don't believe in yourself. Maybe it's as simple as you don't think you're worthy of that promotion at work, or you don't think you're worthy of a marital partner or whatever. Maybe you're not feeling like you're a good mom. I mean, there's all those things. Or for me specifically, that came out when I was in my amputation kind of early days and thinking, am I going to be able to make it through this? And for me, that was a general way of saying, will I have a joyful life again? Will I have any quality of life again? Will I get to do things again? And I have found that, one, you have to be vulnerable enough to lean into other people. And I'm not a person who wants to be a burden. Nobody does. And so if you're like, gosh, I don't want to do that, I found it's not a burden to simply ask someone to give you some feedback. So I remember, for instance, I would call my dad because he had a friend who was an amputee. I would say, do you think I'm going to be able to blah, blah, blah? And he would answer me just emphatically, absolutely, this, and this. And I would say, okay. Or my kids, I wrote this in the book, but I remember one day distinctly my son, only a year or so after I had learned how to walk on a prosthetic, he said, Mom, you're walking really good today. And I remember just feeling like, wow, because, kids are so honest. It wasn't like he was just saying that out of nowhere. And that fed my soul for weeks. And so again, codifying these lessons in the book, when people give you feedback or say things to you, believe them, take it in, and be okay with asking. And I'll also say, if you're the recipient of someone asking you, don't say anything you don't mean, because it has to be genuine. Nobody wants to hear platitudes or things that are obviously not true, but there's always something to find. And if you can give that to someone or share with them a gone before, back to the scene, or just tell them like, hey, I don't know what's going to happen in this circumstance, but I know you're tough. I know you've been through things before. Whatever it is, asking and receiving just helps you surround yourself by other people's kind of lifting you up when you don't have it left in yourself anymore.
So here's something that I think would be helpful for people watching and listening who want to make a difference in people's life and says, I don't have a lot of money. So in your situation, someone could have given you $100,000. You said, okay, that's really great, but it didn't solve my problem today. No. But having the art of giving someone the gift of helping them see how you believe in them, and there's an art to it, is worth more than the $100,000. And it didn't cost 100%. You anything, but there's a skill to it. It's not like, oh, you're a nice person. What I try to encourage people to do is come with a specific story as to why you think that's true.
Right.
And if you don't believe it, keep your mouth shut. If you really believe, like if I were around you, I would, and I would say to you, okay, Lindsey, what's in my heart is that your courage and your tenacity to find your way through two different things and not be angry with God, and to find a true north, how you're going to utilize this. I find that extremely, extremely inspiring. And I'm not 100% sure that given the same circumstances, I would do the same thing. But being around you gives me the confidence that maybe I could do what you do. So I hope you see that in yourself. Well, that's genuine. Yeah. Right. And so being really specific with people, I think is helpful. And I would also say,
that's a great example of just how you said it, because you're acknowledging observations. It's not generic. It's not everything happens for a reason, or you've got this. And those things are okay too.
Yeah.
But again, it's that quote that you text just because you're not sure if that person wants to hear from you. It's that card you send. It's that specific thing you say. It's calling on someone's support system, or at least you're getting that person the perfect medical care. You're doing everything you can. I mean, there's so many things that can uplift people, and also don't underestimate how important that is. If your day's going fine, you might not think that would be useful, but when someone is hanging by a piece of dental floss, the smallest word, the smallest thing, because people don't want pity, they want hope.
They do. And even though you may be in a good situation, there's likely lots of people around you who are not, because they're dealing with their own traumatic experiences. And what happens, and this is where I think you're getting at, is that people that are there have a tendency of believing the lie in their head. You know, when I went through betrayal, I just really felt like I was worthless, and I could, and I had to have, people tell me like, "Why are you believing that? That is like this and this and that." I needed that voice of community around me. Right. Okay, let's go to the next one. Asking and that's the one we covered already. Okay, this was doing. Okay, doing. Pushing yourself to explore the limits of what you can do. Okay, tell us about that.
For sure. And I think there's two sides of this. There's the self and there's the caregiver, because I know a lot of you are caregivers. So listen up on this front too, those of you who are most people and are caring for children or somebody who has a medical need or an older parent or whatever. But as the person going through something, again, I'm a trial and error person, and you've got to put yourself out there and push yourself to get unstuck. And so whether it's things like I write about in the book, like ziplining just after, getting a prosthetic, which sounds crazy, not really the, getting harnessed and flying through the air, but getting up to the point and hiking up, to all the multiple stairs. But it made me feel so accomplished. Or after, again, my lung transplant, making myself say, today, I'm not only going to go 1 miles further, I'm going to go half mile further. Maybe I can do it. And then you get off and you think, if I can do this, I can do anything. And so that like unstuckness, and sometimes it's a bit of stubbornness. I mean, I remember one time we live out in the country and we have this like ATV with the snow shovel on it. My husband wasn't home and I could barely walk, but I went out there and I pushed the driveway.
Yeah.
But I came in that day and I was like, I've got this. And so giving yourself a little bit of rope and a little bit of push. And then as the caregiver, my husband's fantastic at this. He will say, I think you can do this, or I think you can do that. This is how we'll adapt. We're going to do this, this, and this, and I think you can do it. And then I do. And it makes me feel so great. There's been other circumstances where he's been fearful if I do something because both of us are scared of, okay, what if it doesn't go right? But he has said, okay, and been supportive when I do that. And I think that's so important. When you're caring for somebody or supporting somebody, it's hard sometimes because you're so scared they're going to get hurt, or your kid's going to put themselves out there and something bad's going to happen. And sometimes that's true, but more often than not, either something good will be learned from it or confidence will be established from it. But you have to kind of have a little bit of a courageous edge to break through challenge.
Yeah. So everyone listening, watching, what's that thing that pushes you to the next level? Because it's not only going to be exciting, but it's also going to be a part of the confidence you need to get yourself into a new perspective, a new place, right?
Yes.
Okay, last one is trusting. And this is the one you really wanted to spend some time on. Having the faith that things will work out. What do you mean by that?
I'm trying to think about even where to bite that off because there's so much to it. But I think the simplest way, and then we can elaborate on it a little bit, is to stop trying to project the entire future and to try not to take it all upon yourself. I mean, there were so many things, and you do have to do things, obviously, in life. God helps those who help themselves. I do believe in that. But I started to get to the point where I realized there are so many fears and so many different outcomes for my multiple conditions that if I spend all of my time thinking about those things, because again, our negativity bias comes back in, right? What's that stat we've all heard? Like 95% of the things we worry about never come to fruition. Or they don't end up being a bad thing. Yep. I mean, there's a very small percentage of things that are in the quadrant of bad and actually happened.
Right.
But it's where we spend most of our time and thoughts. And so what I found is if you really want to engage your soul and have joy in the struggle and all of those things, because we do have struggle, you've got to find a way to have joy in it, is sometimes you just have to trust and say, okay, God, you've got this, or I'm going to accept how it's going to go, or I heard you. I heard when you put that little Walking Free song in my head that it's going to be okay, that this is not going to be a problem. I mean, a story I didn't have a chance to tell. I don't even think I told this one in my book. But when I got home from the 3-month journey that I had to go on to get my lung transplant, you have to stay in an area about 3 months on average to do everything they need you to do as follow-up. And so it was difficult to be away from my family. You know, my kids had started middle school during that time. And when I got back, I'd only been back a month or so, and I was still very compromised for my immunity. And I ended up, through, you know, a virus that came into our household, I ended up getting RSV, which, you know, you think is mainly a child and baby thing, but it's not a great thing when you just had a lung transplant.
Yeah, no
So there I
joke.
was, catapulted back into the hospital. I was on this crazy like bubble tent with these weird breathing treatments. I mean, just when I thought I'd kind of checked this box. And again, I heard the song in my head, essentially, that everything was going to be okay. And I was really starting to get depressed because I was like, I'm never going to make it through this sludge. And that song would play in my head. And finally one night I was like, okay, God, I hear you. I got it. I'm just going to sit here in my tent, do what I have to do. And I'm not going to obsess and worry about all the bad things. And just trusting, whether that's asking for guidance and believing it, or it's realizing that there is hope, or realizing that I can't do anything about it today, whatever it is, but trusting and letting go a little. Again, I'm not perfect. I hold on, I worry, I'm human. I try to be a little more like Jesus every day, but I'm far from it. But doing it a percentage of the time is just freeing. And it just helps you focus on today and not get caught in that 95% fear cycle that we often live in.
Yeah. The scripture that we're told that the scripture says, fear not 365 times. I actually think it's actually a little bit more than that, but hey, let's go with the 365. God put it in the scriptures for us 365 times, because every day we need to be reminded to trust and to fear not.
Yes.
There's also the scripture. It's often quoted, and so it could be a little bit cliche, but it's a promise. All things work together for the good to those who love God and are called according to his purpose. But there's a condition that all things do not always work together for the good. It's to those who will align their life to what God is up to, and those who will give their life to what they're called to do. If you will just align your life to what God is doing in your life, he's going to promise to you, he's going to get a good story out of your life. It says thus the good. It doesn't say always your good, meaning how you define it, but the overall good. And I can live with that. You know, that at the end of the day, I might have gone through a lot of trial, but if at the end of the day, it produced a good story, I can be okay with that for me, right?
Right.
Okay, so here we are. I've only covered 2 principles. There's that much rich depth. I've got so many things I want to delve into, but we're going to let this be an appetite for the people to pick up the book, The Gift of Perspective. And we just covered 2 principles. There is 5 more. I'm just going to read them.
Yeah.
This is one I wish we could have gotten to. Okay. Part 2 coming up, open up, explore vulnerability, because that was a big thing for me. Reframe, find the hidden advantages. The next one, dig deep, pursue relentless resourcefulness. And finally, check yourself. Don't assume your assumptions are valid. And that's that whole idea of believing the lie.
Yes.
And there's so many wonderful stories. So I want to wrap us up, and I'm going to give you a final word. Okay. I want you to tell us where people can connect with you, as well as just a final word, your final comment to people. But I want to say to people that are listening, we just covered 2 of 7 principles. These are not intellectual principles alone. These are truth principles that have been lived out in a life of a real live stick-em-you-bleed person who is a fellow West Sider and is experiencing the positivity of that. Not toxic positivity. That's not what we're promoting here, but a pathway to get a new perspective that will help you out of the hole that you might be in. All I'm going to ask you to do, even just what we've covered, is to pick one thing that we've said, just one, whatever it is, and give it a try, but not just once, but as a discipline in your life. And if it helped you, add another one, and then add another one, and see if you do not get the gift of perspective. So with that said, tell us where people can find you, and then give us a final kind of comment to the congregation that you love so much.
Okay. Well, As far as finding me, I'll start with finding the book. You can find it Amazon's the simplest. It's also on other book websites. You can connect with me if you just want to chat or anything that hits your heart. I have a website, lindseyroy.com, that there's a way to email me from there, or Lindsey Roy. You can look up Lindsey Roy 26 on Instagram. It's an open account. So anyway, I'd love to connect with you and hear from you, especially since this is our local family. That would be fantastic. And as far as my final thought, I'm just going to elaborate a little bit on how I closed yesterday. So I'm sure many of you, listening, and Randy, I'm sure you've heard this and heard other people. I'm sure your son gets this. People will say, "You're an inspiration," or "I could never do what you do." And that's a common thing that I hear as well. And I almost recoil to it a little bit because I don't feel like any of this is my, own goodness. It's what God has put in me, and it makes me feel guilty. And I also want people to realize that they too can do what they've been called for. So the couple of things I started or ended with yesterday, one was you have been chosen for your story.
Yes.
And this is more of a new revelation. I mean, I'm growing every day like you're growing every day. This isn't something that I've ruminated on a lot, but I heard somebody else say this recently, and it just really struck me that instead of getting into the why me, I had people say to me all the time, "Oh my gosh, why do you have to go through this lung transplant? You've already been through so much." A, you don't want to hear that. You don't want to win the lottery of bad things. And B, I started to say asking why me is a path to nowhere. But it's much more empowering to say, okay, I've been chosen for this story. Why did I get this unique story?
Yeah.
It's so much more empowering. And then the second thing is you have been equipped for your journey. I have had a unique journey, as have many people. But when I look back at the people God's put in my life, the situations God's put in my life, the medical access, the faith, the strength, whatever. And I might not have it until I get to that point. Sometimes it's like you're looking down the marathon path and you're like, I can't see. I don't think I have that. But when I get to the next mile, it's like that little package was waiting there for me with everything I needed. And I've just found that time and time again. So I want you all to know that you really do have what you need for your journey. But again, just trust. Keep walking forward in the dark, the lamp upon your feet, however you want to say it, and you'll find a little package there waiting for you. I find them all the time, and it amazes me every time.
That is a perfect way to wrap this up. I'm adding no more commentary to that. That was amazing. And so everybody listening, watching, if you like this episode, like it, and then also share it with somebody else. We will have another episode coming up soon. Until then, we love you. West Side out.